Welcome back to Islam in the 21st Century. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now, in our panel today, we're discussing the article on Islam21c.com entitled Leading the Community, which looks at the current leadership of the Muslim community, especially in mosques and other organizations, and looks at its effectiveness and the concept of leadership in Islam. Asifuddin, the article actually states that the first quality which a community leader must have is Shari'i knowledge, or knowledge of Islamic jurisprudence, the fundamentals of Islam. Do you agree with that?
Not completely. There are examples of leaders in the past, and they were not known to be extremely knowledgeable or had a very deep understanding of Islam. Rather, they just knew the fundamentals, and this was sufficient.
Can you give us some examples?
An example of this would be Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala an. He was not considered to be an alim. He didn't have very deep knowledge of Islam. It is stated that he didn't know a lot of Quran. He wasn't known to be a hafidh of Quran, and so on and so forth. So that level of knowledge is not required for someone to be a leader. He was known for his fighting and for his warrior abilities, and this was sufficient for him to immobilize the army and so on and so forth. And there is other examples as well, like Salahuddin Ayyubi, and I'm giving examples of those who partook in jihad. But to be honest, it is sufficient for someone just to know the fundamentals of Islam, and they can gain help and assistance from the scholars. And I think there's been a shift. I think there needs to possibly be a shift in the way that we are conveying al-Islam and in partaking in da'wah. Because a lot of the da'wah that we are partaking in revolves around sending or sponsoring students to study in various universities around the globe. Medina University, University in Islamabad, to go and study Islam. And perhaps we need to take this initiative to sponsor students to go and study management courses or how to lead the Islamic community, and they can also learn Islam, but as a secondary aspect as well, because the effect that they can have is possibly more than what some of the students of knowledge have in the da'wah today. Because alhamdulillah, we have many students of knowledge who are conveying Islam in its pristine form and so on and so forth. But the organization that is involved in disseminating that knowledge is something that I feel that the Muslim community is lacking in.
Can I also step in here as well and just say there's an important distinction we need to make between imams and community leaders. And the article doesn't really make that very clear. And we've actually been using those two terms interchangeably in terms of leadership.
Yeah, we have.
And of course, for someone to be an imam leading the prayer and disseminating knowledge, then obviously the primary qualification a person has to have is that of Shari knowledge. But leadership and leading is much more broad than simply leading the people in prayer or giving a lecture or lesson in the mosque. And many of our projects require, projects in our local communities, in our areas, and our masajids require people to lead them. And the most important criteria or qualification there is the ability to lead. And so sometimes actually someone who has a deep understanding of Sharia doesn't make a good leader, and vice versa. Someone who has good leadership and management skills, just because they don't have very good or a huge amount of knowledge in Islam, shouldn't prevent them from pushing forward other projects and leading other projects in the community. The most important really quality after leadership, having the ability to lead, is knowing a person's own worth. Yes, and so it's important that if a person is leading in a particular project, and this is really where many of the problems occur in our mosques, where we have people that are quite good at leading, and so can lead things through quite well, but they treat the imams or the scholars as subordinates to them, and so quite often the imams have to play the lip service or the yes men to the committee or the leaders of a particular given mosque, and that's wrong. Rather, it should be those people that are leading the community in terms of projects and issues regarding the masajid, they should lead, but they should consult the people of knowledge and the scholars to allow their leadership to be best informed, and so they don't break Islamic laws and principles, and they're allowed to grow and to really work where their strengths are in terms of leading projects and community issues.
Murtaza Sheikh, Sheikh Faraz has really touched on a really important point here. But now he's not talking about leaders who are individuals. He's talking about shura or consultation, whereby you have leaders consulting Islamic scholars. And do you think this is part of the problem? We're looking for the dynamic individuals who have all the qualities, as opposed to committees or panels of people who have between them all the qualities.
Yeah, I would just like to highlight that what Sheikh Faraz has said is that it is not necessary. He's not said this is what must happen. He says this is not necessary that these two qualities may be found in the same person. It may be that they may be found in two different people, but it may be that they're found in the same person. And it is wrong when they are apparent, when they are clearly present in one person. Let's say an imam is clearly a good leader, that aspect of his job is not given to him. And even when the imam is not a good leader, the duty on the leadership, let's say the committee, to consult, it should be genuine consultation. It should not be consultation, oh yes, we have an imam and we spoke to him. Yeah? And especially when it goes against things which are fixed in the Sharia. For example, let me go from the general to the specific. For example, when there are mixed gatherings, for example, in the mosque, when there is music, when there are women with makeup, these kind of things, if you refer it back to the people of knowledge, there's no way that they would be allowed. Clearly, the imam maybe is not the leader, but they must respect the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a problem in many places. But the flip side of that coin is, yes, it's not necessary for the imam to be the leader, especially if he is not the best man for the job. But the consultation has to be genuine.
Okay. Now, one of the key aspects which is mentioned of leadership in the article is a firm grasp of the political and social landscape, which we assume means leaders looking beyond just the mosque and knowing the wider context. What do you think is the importance of that?
I think it's very important, but it's very important, but we have to. It's possible that it may not be present in all places, and we cannot say for someone who is an incredibly good community leader, who has projects, who involves children, who involves the whole community in educational issues, and is a good imam. We cannot then say to them, you're doing a rubbish job because you're not politically and socially involving people in the, having political programs or getting people politically engaged. This is asking for too much, I think. But definitely, if it's possible, and if there are leaders or imams out there who are active in this aspect, in this area, then it's definitely very beneficial because engaging the Muslim youth in the mechanisms, in the systems that already exist, is one way to stop them from doing things which are counterproductive, which are against Islam. Stop them from going either to misunderstand Islam or to go completely away from Islam. It's vital to involve in all different aspects.
If I can also add that initially when Muslims came into this country, they had certain challenges that they tried to meet. So the initial challenges were having centres, community centres and mosques, where people could just be allowed to worship freely. And perhaps many of those committee members have kind of lingered and remained there, and maybe lost sight of the changing economic, political, social landscape as mentioned in the article. That's not to say that what they did was wrong. And so let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. They did a lot of good and a lot of excellent work that they did in establishing mosques and community centres when they first came into this country. But it now needs a different type of leader to meet the challenges that we're now facing today. Challenges of identity, challenges of work, challenges of social issues about interaction, things like drugs and sexual awareness and all of that and all of those things Muslims that are now facing today. They need some kind of guidance, some kind of leadership in how to deal with them. Perhaps the hierarchical committee aren't really best suited to deal with those problems now. That's not to say that other people should not take a lead and really lead some of those projects and ideas to try and help the community as they deem fit.
But we should also be cautious, and we should also understand that what they've achieved in the time that they've achieved it, and we must have respect for that, and we must acknowledge the difficulties there are. You know, think about all the plots of land that are bought, all the planning permissions that are bought, all of the struggle that's happened to establish a place of prayer where people, you know, leaving aside aqidah or manhaj or anything, but just to have a place for people to go and pray in, it's a huge achievement. And then they've gone much further than that. So sometimes I think people, my group, let's say youth, they are very quick to judge. So it's not, I think the approach should be changed. It shouldn't be just, you know, fiery criticism. It should be, these are things that we have issues with, and then present them to these people. And of course there are situations where those views are not listened to and are not absorbed and are not taken in and worked on. So there is an issue there, but I think there is definitely a tendency among youth, because they can see an issue which is clearly wrong, to jump and to be too critical and to be too aggressive.
I'd like to thank my panel for today's discussion, Asifuddin, Sheikh Faraz Farhat, Murtaza Sheikh. As always, to have your say and to register your comments on the debate, please go to www.islam21c.com. The article is Leading the Community, so to express your views on the leadership of the Muslim community in the UK, please go ahead. وجزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.